Chris Hill from B Collective. In this masterclass, we're going to talk about obviously high performance, a little bit about my background. It really gets into risk, change management, and how all of us as builders can really grow and embrace the change that's most likely coming. So this masterclass is for peers, builders that want to grow in the industry. Hey, even some consultants, designers, and trades could probably listen in and enjoy it. But really about that builder that is a little worried or a little scared of what is coming with the policy changes and change that's occurring in this industry. So we try to break down some of those pieces and learn from some of my experiences. Examples that we talk about in this master class are, there's real world examples from our company at B Collective, what we've been doing with Boss, and there's also examples as the industry as whole, as how we can collaborate and do good, understanding some of the impact and some tidbits of what might come in the future. We also are going to talk about sort of the next steps or what we did in our business to sort of embark on this change, some lessons learned, some mistakes that are made, and maybe some things that I would do differently. The influence of mentors, what peer groups mean to us, and sort of how we can build out a succinct organization that has the effective brand, the effective marketing, effective culture to really impart this change or this exercise of exploring high performance homes. We also dig into a little bit about the integrated design process, what works, what hasn't worked in residential construction, and how B Collective as an organization is starting to tackle it and take a bit more control. My name's Chris Hill. I'm the president and founder of B Collective. We have 4 partners in B Collective. And my origin story, so where I got started in this industry, I came into the industry late. I was a lumber broker for a number of years prior, sort of my mid-20s to mid-30s. I was a broker sending lumber all over the world, and a lot of that's logistics, planning, and organization. I kind of came to a crux in that industry where I just didn't like it. It wasn't the right path. It felt like I was paddling up a creek without a paddle. So I made a change, and I wasn't sure what that change is. I went and got an accounting degree because I knew that the numbers and finances were important. And through that, it led me to construction. So I'm fortunate. My brother runs a construction company, Ritchie Custom Homes in the Okanagan. I was working with him and around him a lot and saw what he was doing, and it really resonated with me. So we started a company in Vancouver. At the time, it was Ritchie Construction. And that operated for about 5 years, and then we merged into B Collective. So different than a lot of people in the industry. I've come at this with a slightly different background. We definitely grew up on the tools and renovating and building forts, but I don't have a big carpentry background or a family that's been in construction for a number of years. B Collective. So after Ritchie Construction, it became apparent to scale the business the way I wanted to. I couldn't do it alone. I needed good people around me to make things really gel and work and scale. Building 1 or 2 homes a year was good, but it wasn't what I wanted. It wasn't the size of organization that we were trying to grow. So 3 builders came together to form B Collective. B stood for a lot of things for us, but it was sort of be Collective, be collaborative, come together and do some good. Right from the onset of B Collective, we established some really core values that set us on a path to become a B Corp organization with impact, social, environmental, and governance goals strongly in place. And from there, we're about 3 or 4 years into B Collective and just starting to see what we've created gel and come together as a strong organization. The why for me, why did I change what seemingly was a good career path and go into construction? I think at first it was the ability to not be in front of a computer screen the whole time and to be able to use my hands and see something tangible created. We've all been a part of that construction site, those big days where there's 15, 20 or more people running around. Sometimes it's a big concrete pour, or it's getting the dance floor on your second or third floor of a house. That energy and that sense of accomplishment in the day or the time, I think is where the passion was. Housing to me is really important. It's shelter. It's one of the necessities in life. It creates home. It's such, over the last few years, I think it's even increased. It's our safe environment. It's our safe space. And so it's a really, it's a needed piece of life. So I think in a resiliency planning space, I think that's always something that's resonated with me. For me, the passion lied in improving that. What is the best way to do it? And that's where we, as an organization or myself, started to really explore high performance building, passive house, or improving that shelter. If we're going to build something that's going to protect or provide safety, what's the best possible way to do that? And that's really what led down sort of that itch that was scratched with passive house, with high performance, with building science. So how can I be the best in my industry or near the top of my industry to provide that level of safety? So for me, the building industry is yin and yang. There's some really positive things, and like I mentioned, within shelter and these positive outcomes and walking through people through a space and then just being elated with the transformations that have occurred in a renovation or a new home. The other side of it is the frustrations, the conflicts, the level of emotion that comes with building somebody their dream home or their space, and the expectations they hold. Cost overruns are pretty real these days, and having to constantly deliver a message of you're over budget. The costs have come, this is what the costs have come in. This current design that you're in love with and is amazing is significantly over your budget. And those are these constant frustrations that we're facing in this industry. It's hard. I think you need to find that passion in this industry to be able to be successful and not get burdened down, because there is a huge responsibility load as a general contractor in what we're trying to do. For us, that the crux point on the piece in our organization is to really find that passion. We really dove deep into the impact side of things. So how can we have positive environmental impact on what we're doing? I think at this point we all know buildings and the energy we use to create that shelter and comfort is a fairly significant factor in the energy used globally. And so what can we do to improve that as an industry, and knowing that we're doing something good so it keeps that fire going inside. The fire for me of building new things and seeing that passion in clients is starting to wane. So where do you find that new level of passion, which for us and Be Collective has been in the impact space, really empowering what that can be for our clients and the buildings that we build. The turning point for me personally, and this is going back a little bit, was a meeting with an architect, Allison Holden Pope from One Seed. I remember meeting in her office. I clearly remember sitting down, and we were talking about an upcoming project and client she had. And she sort of introduced me to Passive House. And I don't want to push Passive House too much in this space, but I recall walking out of that meeting, making a note on my phone to dig a little bit deeper into what this passive thing is all about. I remember spending the next 3 days on a deep dive of information, consuming as much as I could, signing up for education, signing up for anything that I could to consume, predominantly on the building science side of things. It just started to make sense for me on that click. And I, at that point in my career, didn't have a ton of building knowledge, to be blunt. I hadn't come from a history of banging nails or slashing poly. So it was where I could consume that information, and it made sense, and I knew it could help my career. The further I researched, I saw it in policy. City of Vancouver had adopted the Passive House standard in their policy. Energy Step Code was starting to be materialized at that point. And so it was really clear to me that the industry was going to go this way, and it had support. It wasn't something that you had to backstrap at this point to get it through. There's a lot of people, and we'll probably get into mentors at some point in this conversation. There's a lot of leaders that had already done a lot of the hard work to get that through. So for the decision for me, it was a good business decision, something that I could separate my business at the time and also Be Collective into a niche space and be an expert in. And that was really what sort of catalyzed that movement and transformation specifically into high performance. For others in the high performance space, I think it comes back to values. So writing down your own personal values and making sure that high performance checks some of those boxes. And I'd argue at this point, it's pretty tough not to have it check those boxes. It does make business sense. It does make financial sense. It does help the environment. It does have the potential to help the housing crisis. It can do all these things if you accept it and lean into it. So personally, I think it's important in a passion space or value space, or really to get up and deal with the conflicts and the hard days. You need to have that value alignment and making sure it does that, and understanding it. I would also scratch that itch. Find your values, find what you want to do, what your passions are, and then start to scratch it and let yourself deep dive, dig in, get the education, get the knowledge to empower it. One of the beautiful things about a GC is a level of control. We have the ability to make change. We get to hire all the sub-trades. We get to do all these pieces. Be Collective is now taking it the level of control further. We're getting much further into design. This started through the integrated design process. Our ability to control the outcome of the project, we have to be involved at the start. We're finding that we're using common details now. We're using the same system repeatedly over and over again. And that's how we can manage our risk, which ultimately relates to the customer costs. So we don't see high performance escalating in the cost price, because we've sort of come over that learning curve and are now on a repetition space. So it's an exercise in change management to get to that space. So I mentioned it earlier, and I think a mentor is really critical. I've never I guess I've had one formal mentor that didn't really work out because it was kind of forced. It was a loan application that made you connect with a mentor, and we connected a few times, but it was not organic. I think the most powerful ones are the mentorships you don't even realize till it's after. So in my early career as a lumber broker, my boss formed me. He was a mentor. I still communicated with him all the time to this day. This mentor previously in my lumber broking world was able to impart some really solid values in me, and his mentorship led to a big thing for him was the number of tasks you get done in a day. So he would always comment on how he is able to get done so much more than the average person. And it's something that I've tried to do and continue to do is how much can I get done in a day with still maintaining a high quality on that to-do or task list. The other one that he always said is, you're never going to be the smartest person in the room, but can you be the wisest? So some of those pieces of, again, into the education space is continually being able to learn, absorb, and the ability to rethink. Sometimes we are wrong, and a wise person would be able to rethink some of the assumptions they've made and then be able to change into what would be the future of that. For an individual, sort of the young guys, and I remember early in my career, and as a GC, I was older getting into it. And I had mentors that probably didn't even realize they were my mentors. Some of the early people within the passive house space, Marcel Struder at Econ Group, were mentors. And I emulated a lot of the HAVAN builders early on. Watched what they were doing, how they were marketing, and try to figure out where does my business or where do we fit into that space. So I think mentorship is a funny thing. It can be very acknowledged and two-way street, but finding somebody that you resonate with and going for coffee once a week and just maintaining that relationship is a strong form of mentorship. And I think technology today gives us that ability. It can be a phone call. It can be a Zoom meeting. It can start to get structured over time. But having those people and that wisdom accelerates your individual growth significantly. So yeah, I'm a strong believer in mentorship. My first high performance home. So at the time, I wouldn't consider this home high performance by today's standards or what we're building now, but at the time, my first house, so I've never built anything under step code 3 is the truth, not by design. And so my first house at the time was a high performance home. It had unconventional details in it. And it's because I got into this late. I was a lumber broker, accountant, trying to be a general contractor. There was positives and negatives to that experience. I think ultimately the positive is I came in with a clean slate. I think it's called the imposter syndrome, where you don't really know what you're doing, so you work twice as hard. Was definitely what occurred for me in this space. And since then, we've obviously found some success in that space. So I think coming in with a clean slate was a strange advantage for me. So our first home at the time was, it was a step code 3 pushing step code 4 in that space. In the passive space, I was fortunate enough to work with other builders on a number of projects. So I always say we've been on a number of passive house projects. And so that was one of the things is leaning on others in the industry and providing support, understanding where we can provide value to other builders, but in turn getting the education and the knowledge back on that. So I would lend out my labor forces, my key guys, to other builders, and they got an opportunity to hands-on understand what is going to happen in those projects in that space. We also, through the BC grant program, I've probably educated 10 to 15, more than 10, probably 15 employees in the high performance space, directly from that have worked for me now or worked for me in the past, which I think was really critical in that tackling those early projects. My feeling has always been, if you know how to build the race car, it's easy to take a step down, literally in the steps to step 4 or 3. But if you understand the principles, and everybody in the organization understands those principles so they can make good decisions, made it go a lot more smoothly. In the high performance space and the frustrations, it's the learning gap is the really hard one. So it's tough. I just feel like it's just constant. You're constantly coming against, we're still, even today, even my organization, if you're coming to us, you're pretty obvious that we're building an airtight house. We're still seeing everyday trade objections to certain things, new details. It's just a constant exercise in change and sort of battling that. Fortunately, I think most of the building inspectors have come a long way. But the early days of high performance, it was spending half your time educating clients, educating trades, educating consultants, educating your building inspectors, all these different people. It just was relentless. I think we're starting to see that cusp come around, but it's still a very small and minor part of the industry that needs to change quite quickly to keep up to, at this point, policy and bylaws. On the space of education, and I know we've sort of broken into change management a little bit, and there's fear of this being different. There's fear of, it's an uphill battle. There's a learning curve at the start of this. I think for the older generation that's been doing this for 30 years, their knowledge and expertise is so valuable, and we can't lose it right now, especially to impart that on the younger generation. And for that individual that's fearing these changes, and they've got these ideas that have been ingrained in them on how to build for over the period. And we haven't really changed construction, depending on which element you look at, for a long time. And so I think there's opportunity in this change, and there will be some companies and organizations that die out and don't accept that challenge. I think there's a lot of organizations, and the smarter organizations will adapt. We're all short on labor and all those things. In honest truth, right now, we're seeing lots of youth and come to us because of where we're valued. So I think it's going to, unfortunately, to this older generation, it's going to be a necessity to keep your employees engaged, to keep the impact in place. In that space, I would encourage, a little tip or advice is a book from Adam Grant called Rethink, which sort of challenges our notion of what we've learned in the past and how to open our mind to the possibility of change and the ability to psychologically deal with what that means. And I still will strongly state that the knowledge base isn't that different. It's actually very similar. And a lot of the older senior builders that are scared of this, it's a scary process because it's change. It's something different. But the reality is as once you get into it, it's not that different. It's really a lot of the same things. There's obviously I think financially, a lot of people are early on very worried. It on paper can pencil out to more, and the first couple of projects when you're doing something relatively new are difficult. I see it as a huge opportunity. So in this space of change, we can do better, and we need the knowledge of how things come together and how things are built to really empower it. And I'd also challenge some of that older generation to why they originally got into the industry. And I've sat with enough of the older builders that they love a challenge. They love building something complicated. That's often what the passion comes from. So sort of finding that sort of fire early on, I think, is critical, and getting back to that versus just doing what you've done so well over a period of time. So I see opportunity, and I think there is a number of that older generation that are starting to see that opportunity as well. They're starting to see how it engages with the youth so they can find the appropriate employees. I'm a big believer in offsite construction as well. And I think that's probably going to be the next big change that we're going to have to deal with, is not sending all the elements of a house or the parts of a house to be built on someone's front yard, but seeing the components come into play. That senior generation is so valuable in still seeing how that goes together and their knowledge. It is different, but it's still a square box in a house. In the space of impact versus profit, early on, the sort of the environmental movement, or our thinking was like, do you have to forego, or you're going to leave profit on the table to push an environmental or social agenda? With B Collective, early on, we went after a B Corp certification. It was something that was really just important to us. One of our sub-trades, Sea to Sky, was actually a B Corp at the time, connected us with a really great group of people. In the process of this certification, it became very apparent the lens at which we apply to make our business decisions was really the essence of one of the essence that B Corp was about. So our hiring decisions, hiring minorities, hiring more females in leadership, all these elements became really sort of a lens that we applied to our business. And that started to allow us to create impact. The connection to profit came in what we were able to attract. So it pushes us into a niche market, the people that we were trying to attract in all different aspects, within consultants, within trades, within employees, within clients. Having a core value and a lens at which we apply this to on a consistent basis, like mine, started to attract. We become working towards becoming more of a magnet to attract people versus a megaphone. That's been where we've started to see, and it's still early, we're still a young company, it's not like we're raking in tons of profit, but we're starting to see the profit come in that process. Really defining those values clearly, understanding the lens at which we make decisions throughout our entire business and having our employees engaged in that. We're starting to attract more and more of that and seeing the profit come from it. And I don't think you have to give up. In fact, the whole B Corp movement, you can't be a not-for-profit. So it's for profit businesses to do good. The idea is that you do, the more good you do, the more profit you have, the more impact you can do. So it's really encouraged to really drive home those profits. So within high performance, within impact, with environmental change, within social change, one of the key aspects is our knowledge base increases and the lens that we want to make our decisions change. What that led us to, and which I think is really critical, is the integrated design process. So that puts us in a position at the table much earlier on in the process, so that we can start to apply and impact those changes. It starts with the consultant's selection. It starts with having the client come to us early on in the process. For B Collective, at first that meant we've stopped saying yes. We don't even accept plans anymore. Like that call, like I'm submitting for permit. Do you want to build this house for us? We've got these great plans designed. We early on have sort of stopped doing those kind of projects. It just doesn't make sense. We can't do what we do if we get those projects. And there's rare times that we'll get a set of projects and say, yeah, well, no, we can actually do that because it meets what we're trying to do as a company. Most often we'd get a set of plans that was just, we could probably try and make it high performance, but it would be really expensive. So getting into the project early on with the integrated design process meant that we could impart some of these values and, relatively speaking, control our budget. Repeatable designs, having a conversation about the wall assembly at the very start versus being dictated at the end of the project, allows us to get some commonality in our projects. Using the same trade over and over again, they get used to that different system. The air barrier is really important. Oh, by the way, it's on the outside of the building, it's not on the inside. Having that just means less education. It's less friction in the whole process, which allows that to happen. So for us, integrated design process is really critical. In residential, it's interesting. The integrated design process is fraught with issues. Number one, cost and time. So these projects don't have massive budgets in pre-construction to afford to put everybody in the same room to design a project at the same time. So you end up having these meetings, and then people go away, do their work, and come back. I think it's really critical in the integrated design process that we define what those meetings and workloads are and the next steps and the timeline. One of the things with integrated design that we've found is it can extend that pre-construction or design phases because you're lining up all these meetings. All those meetings, if they're not productive or run well, can also increase your consulting costs, your labor hours and the time you've got to put into these projects. With that all said, it's going to cost more, but a good, well-run pre-construction process with a form of integrated design that you've come together with your team will ultimately reduce your construction costs. The most expensive part of building a building and designing a building is the construction. If we're forced to do things over or redo it or correct our errors once they've already been built, that is significantly more expensive than 5 consultants sitting in a room for 4 hours solving that problem in a digital space. For Be Collective, we've also figured out, we've now engaged in the design process a lot more. So we've hired design, we've hired architects, technologists that understand Revit and can build up a BIM library for us. They can redesign the projects. We can design certain types of housing and buildings we can internally design. So that now is using our internal processes. So we've got that level of control. That being said, we still have to go through an integrated design process. We need those consultants. You need the geo, you need structural. For most projects, and I strongly recommend it, you need an envelope consultant. That is putting teams that are outside of all of our organizations together and organizing to get to the appropriate outcome. A tool that we use to deliver projects within a lower risk tolerance is offsite construction. Offsite construction demands a much higher level of pre-design or digital twinning, replicating a house in Revit or various other tools. I'm embarrassed to say how many times our projects currently get designed in 3D at the moment. It's designed in Revit, sometimes they get designed in SketchUp, and then they still need to go to a production level software like CADWorks or HSB CAD to really develop the 3D model. So that home, that building gets built from a framer's perspective from the ground up. So literally every piece, every screw that goes into that structure gets designed in 3D. So it's amazing what conflicts we're finding. And every time, every building I go through, I'm amazed at, oh, interesting, that's a pretty significant problem that if we'd gone through the previous process, we would have to deal with on site. And that either means doing it over or finding a compromise that works. And we all know those compromises, that beam in the wrong location, that HVAC conflict with a beam, or now we have a drop. All those things, you can solve those problems early on. Yes, it costs more up front, but ultimately, if we look at the total project costs, I think without fail, it starts to reduce those numbers. For the how question of how do I start? Where's my first step into this world of high performance or creating the impact and change that I want to do in my business? I've been building the code for the last 30 years. I'm very comfortable in that. So what's the next step? Number one, it's experience. And one of the joys of our business is that we can hire, I mean, we are forced as GCs to hire lots of subtrades, vendors. This includes consultants. Finding the consultants that you resonate with and have experience in high performance makes a dramatic difference. Finding the organizations or the people that you can talk to, that you can call on those long drive homes in the traffic, that you can just chat with and understand, I think are really critical. So building those relationships with existing builders, consultants, trades in the industry that have some experience in this space, I think is the critical first step. The next step is finding a client or a project that want to go to that space. I don't believe in forcing somebody into doing high performance. I think they need to come to it naturally, because there is, especially on a first project, there's friction. There's friction in every single construction project. You're lying to yourself if you don't feel that, if you don't see that. So it does increase the friction. And so putting yourself out there in a space that you want to have like-minded people that want to do that as well and are willing to go through that friction together, and setting realistic expectations. I cannot stress how much easier that friction is with somebody on the team with experience. It's really critical that first project, find an architect, find a designer, find a structural engineer, an envelope engineer, even your plumber. And I got lots of plumbers that have gone through that trade course, various pieces that have a knowledge in that space. Check in with your trades. Hey, where have you guys at in this space? Are you working with anybody that's doing this? Have you ever done this before? That's where I think you can find like minds that they're going to see that and go through this rethink process together. It's nothing like part of Be Collective is that we've got a strong support group around us. Sometimes that's venting, sometimes that's exchange of information and knowledge. So finding that kind of core group that you can go through with some previous experience, I think is the natural first step. Most of the people that I'm talking to, I'm assuming are builders, you're leaders of your organizations, you're the primary decision makers. In this effort of change, you've got an organization that make a ton of decisions for you in the field, with client-facing clients, all these pieces, even your sub-trades and consultants, all this. Applying your brand in a trickle-down space is really critical. So having an alignment so that your vision, mission, brand, all these pieces are in an alignment is absolutely critical. And engaging the employees, your people, the core people that support your business in this process makes a huge difference. And the trickle-down effect it starts to resonate. So what we found is the people that really wanted to do hard and put the extra effort in started to come up to the top once we really defined our vision, defined our brand as an organization. Brand's a big word. Sometimes it means brand can mean what you present to others. Often the way we term it in our organization, hopefully I don't butcher this, is what people say about you when you're not in the room. That's really what your brand is. There's logos and marketing and look that sometimes is related to brand, but I think the importance of brand is actually what is said about you when you're not there. The other thing would be culture that was sort of lightly touched on. Culture is what your employees say about your organization when you're not there. So what's the sort of underlying the root? Not necessarily what you paint on the walls. Would be really critical in those spaces. So having that alignment and then filtering that through. I mentioned the BC Job Grant is investing in people, investing in the education so that they're empowered in that space. One of the things that I resonate with and one of my biggest joys of late has been being CC'd or BCC'd on emails with my site supervisors, imparting the wisdom of high performance and air barrier detailing to various levels of trades or different people. Like it doesn't have to just come from the top if you empower more of those layers. Within high performance, I think it's for our own sanity as an organization. We're asking our clients, we're going away from this idea of bidding and getting 3 bids as a builder and competing on price. So we've eliminated that from our organization to get clients, but we're still doing it to our sub-trades. What we've been working on over the last few years is building deeper relationships and partnerships with our trades. So investing in them like they are in partners, almost like employees. In a culture space, we've started to invite a lot of our trades, and you'll see it I know a lot of the builders that I emulate are doing this, is they're engaged with the various parties or social activities with a broader group, not just an insular employee group. There is an element, you do have to say goodbye to certain trades that aren't value aligned. Once you start to have a vision, a mission, and put this place, if there are trades, people, employees that are swimming against what you're doing, it is best to cut, remove that, and replace. But I think the other side of that is building better relationships with our trades. Building better relationships with our consultants and obviously, as I mentioned earlier, employees. But in that focus I think it's absolutely critical. We are looking at labor shortages. We are looking at trade shortages. This idea that we're going to push out and get the lowest bid and all these times to reduce construction costs, I think is a bit of an outdated idea. We've definitely explored, and it's not perfect. We've had issues in it for sure. But we've looked at really establishing our top trades, our go-to guys. We've established what their KPIs are. KPIs is an annoying term, key performance indicators. I would say more we've looked at how they estimate, how they define their projects. And so we've started to estimate with them in the project. Number one, it helps us do much better cost engineering on the early project. Hey, that toilet way over there is going to cost you more because I got to do this much of drain pipe through these beams and locations. So it's allowed a significant amount of value engineering of understanding the pressure points within different trades and services. I think we've kind of circled it out to like 12 to 15 key trades in a project that we've really developed a relationship. We're going to do lots of projects together. We need you to make a profit because we want you to be successful, but we also don't need it to be, we don't want to gouge. And so let's understand where these costs are coming from. Hey, this project is $15,000 more than the last one. What changed? And so really working together to find that is where we've found cost advantages and significantly more loyalty. So in this space of scarcity, that's where we've been able to find loyalty. And by no means a perfect system, but we've found loyalty within a trade base that when we need them, they're there. When they respond to our phone calls, they also respond to all our phone calls. They don't just respond to my phone call because I have a president beside my name and write the checks. I don't actually write the checks, but they now respond to our site supers. They respond to our pre-con team, which has taken time. So many of us, our businesses, I think the stat from BC Housing is like 85% of builders in BC build 1 or 2 houses. Those organizations, what Ritchie Construction was before I got to be collective to scale, is small. And so you're heavily reliant on your Rolodex, your phone, your word. Whereas in a growth and in change, there's an opportunity to put that into a broader decision-making power within the team, which I think is absolutely critical. Unless you really like making all the phone calls, which some people do and want to have full control, and more power to them. But I think that's going to be a business model that is not going to have scale or succession within it. There's obviously going to be risk associated with change. With moving into this space, there's a load of risk. There's the unknown. There's an element of unlearning what we've already learned, and then what we're going to learn it on the unknown. I've made a lot of mistakes. I'm okay with the mistakes I've made. It's how you progress. It's how you get better. Mistakes are also the best opportunity to build a deeper relationship. So I think it's how we deal with our mistakes, our errors, tell a lot about us as people, as humans, as partners. So that trade that screwed up a critical detail and you're too far along to change it, there's such an amazing learning opportunity. In the past, a lot of our businesses, like, boom, you're out, you're fired, get away from here, I don't want to ever see you again. But what a chance to really deepen a relationship, provide some education, provide support so that trade employee, the next time they're going to do it better. And I think we can self-reflect on that when we make mistakes. Hopefully we don't make it again, because that's a pretty big error. If you keep burning yourself when you touch the fire, is it the fire's fault? In that space of unknown, I think in a space of building relationships, and if you're choosing to go that route with an integrated design, more of a relationship partner base, which is the business model that we've followed, those mistakes are opportunities. Those mistakes are places to really grow for yourself and your organization. That's the mistake place of risk. I think fundamentally one of the things within risk right now is there's a huge risk for us all to continue building the way we're building. I don't think we have a choice at this time. I think climate change is real. I think buildings have an effect on it. There's just a broader risk that we need to address, and this change is required in that space. I think there is a bit of fear needed in this space that we do need to change, and we need to change quickly. So there's also a risk of staying in your rut. There's a bigger risk if you don't change. If you don't get out into this space of high performance and improvement, you are on a sunset, you are on a declining path. You will find it very hard to find employees. You will eventually find it hard to find trades. Your profitability will be taken out because the consumer will want a better product. They'll want a safer product. So there's probably more risk, in my opinion, actually just staying on the same course. You will not be able to build to code in a few years as well. So you're like, the writing's on the wall, so it's time to engage in that. Overall, I think it's important to define the risk strategy. Each risk strategy for each organization is going to be different. Peers are critical. I've been fortunate to put together a couple of peer groups that has an external consultant. External consultants within business strategy, within any of the different tools that we need, individually are quite expensive. You're $300-400 an hour session at best, even $500-600. If you put 10 people together, that's $500 individual, that really high-priced individual is a lot less money. you also get the support of people that are going through the same thing together. And it's been a really critical piece for us. These are the peer group that we have are direct competitors. They are people that we are literally fighting for business on a daily basis. I think HAVAN has a number of good examples, our local Homebuilder Association, of peer groups that come together to share that knowledge base and bring the industry up together. And that's really how we can reduce risk. That sharing of information is absolutely critical. And I think a lot of builders feel they've got some secret sauce. They've got some piece of knowledge or tidbit that separates them from the industry. And I think those are few and far between at this point. I think, and I would argue that they probably could pose more risk. And if it was that great, I would patent it, franchise it, and roll it out. But that isn't really what we're seeing in the industry, and it hasn't happened. I'm a believer in sharing, collaboration, open source, bringing everybody up, because that brings the whole market up. It puts a better light on the market, and we all have more business. There is enough, even in a recession time that we're looking at, for the builders that are doing a good job, not even a great job, a good job. There's a huge amount of opportunity. Some of us will switch back to renovations, which have a space for some versions of retrofits, improvements. Those are all key places that there's a big opportunity in front of us, which will ultimately mitigate a lot of those risk elements, in my opinion. An area that I think creates friction is even within the BC housing registered builders credits that we're now forced to go get a number of education credits. A lot of those education credits are on the step code, on high performance building, making it more airtight, increasing your R value, exterior insulation, all these elements. And a tool that we use in that space is the energy advisors. Like all consultants, not all energy advisors have an equal knowledge base or expertise. So I think finding one that resonates with your value center, what you're doing, is really critical. And the conflict and the friction comes is builders are getting really smart. We're learning a lot more about building science. We're learning different tools, techniques, learning different ways as we all change in this industry. And I don't think it's advisable. I've come up with energy advisors and sort of said, really? That's gonna cause conflict with what is happening on the structural side of things or the envelope side of things. So I think it's this double-edged sword as builders and as we get more knowledge, what does our role change to? And I think in the IDP process, in a Part 9 home, we're typically not working with an architect. So I found we often become the coordinator. Or there's at least one, if you've got a strong designer, a strong architect, they're doing a coordination level, they're kind of running the IDP. Or if you've got a builder that's got a high level of knowledge, they're running it, and that back and forth. So I think early on in the process, defining who's running it, where are those relationships, where do they lie, and what are the expectations. An over-reliance on an energy advisor, I think, is troublesome. I think that industry has a lot of place to grow. There are a number of really, 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 really good energy advisors, and there's a number of poor ones, as in any industry. And as a builder and down this path in high performance, your knowledge is going to grow to a place that can often outpace an energy advisor. If you become one of the good ones and they're not, it's just going to get spaced apart. So I think it's dangerous to over rely on, to be honest, any consultant, but also know the expertise and find the experts that do have that expertise and you can work with and keep up with you. That's one of the things we found is we have outpaced certain consultants. We've outpaced certain trades. That is the reality of the industry, and that's okay. And I think that's a big part of the change in understanding that. Find a good EA though. Find one that is spend that time early on in that relationship to make sure that they're value aligned. Yeah, they have more power in the blower door tests and the energy consulting, and with the new policy with step code, they have a lot of power in that space. And nothing against that industry, but they're not as educated or regulated as a structural engineer with a professional stamp, or an envelope consultant with a professional stamp. So I think there is a space of growth there, and it's just sort of a warning that we're seeing is finding one that doesn't put you in a place of risk in this space is really critical. Now that we have registered builders and CPD points and credits, it's a great opportunity to curate this process of change. One of the beauties is there's a lot of education providers, there's a lot of education out there, and it's relatively easy to sort of weed through what that is and make sure you're getting credits that are on the path, on brand, what you're looking to do, what you're interested in. Find those passions and scratch that itch. The CPD credits allow us to do that, and it's a requirement, so it's forced. But rather than just begrudgingly go to a class on waste reduction, go find one on outbound insulation, or something that you're weak in but interested in and know that you need to learn. So I think there's a great opportunity, and I think if you start to define your journey or your organization's journey a little bit further, it's not just 1 year at a time. It's if we're going to be into this, like we're now, I don't know, 5 or 6 years into credits. If you've been taking the right courses, you don't need me to tell you anything. All of us need clients. We need clients. That's what pays our bills. We need projects. So how do we find projects that are value aligned with our vision, our purpose, and what we want? Obviously, there's an element of that needs to go in our marketing, our messaging, and we're going to change and alter. For B Collective, we were a first mover. We're definitely on the sort of cutting edge of this space, if you will. And that's allowed us to niche, find those clients. It's quite humorous, to be honest. There's 3 or 4 builders that we literally talk monthly about, hey, did that person call you yet? Hey, did that person call you yet? Because it's that small. Anybody doing a passive house project like we're doing, they basically call 4 of us. An architect will call the 4 of us. That 4 of us is growing, which is amazing. It's great. In fact, the builders in that space, and I'd somewhat include myself, but more some of the key people are the ones that are educating and growing that base. There's this big block, the second movers, if you will, that second phase of builders that are going to come into play, that will start to adapt and change. The policies on the writing's on the wall. It will happen at some point. It's just a matter of when. For those individuals, I think it's a remarketing place. I don't think you're going to find the niche aspect of it, but it's resonating with the right clients, and it's your value proposition. One of the things as builders, what I believe we're really providing is confidence. We're providing confidence that we can deliver a project. The obvious are on budget, on schedule, with some version of quality. The consumer that we're starting to see, with even the code increasing, is a more educated consumer that wants a safer home. They want their builder to understand that. They want their builder to understand building science. They don't know what they don't know. So they're going to want the nice, fancy things, and that's, in my opinion, really easy to deliver at this point. They're not going to know what's in their walls, but they want the builder to be confident in it. For B Collective now, we've been in this space a while. I don't talk about building science with consumers. We talk about the outcomes. They don't need to know where that air barrier is or the vapor barrier, what the perm levels of our wall is. We're going to talk about the outcomes, the moisture management that it will do inside the home. And we'll do it in a confident way. That confidence is what resonates and what our consumers ultimately want. And I think that second group, as their confidence in this space grows, that's what is going to attract the good quality clients that we all look for. In the space of client expectations, so wanting the marble countertops, the hardwood floors, the magazine-ready photos at the end of the project, versus the value centers of high performance and moisture management and R values and the appropriate windows. We've taken a tact recently that's less to do with convincing people and just doing it. The pretty things are what comes are the post product. Is if we want to deliver on the high performance aspects, it's in our literature, we're marketing it, but in a client specific meeting, I sort of start to explore what their expectations are and what their desires are. In those early meetings is pulling out what a home means to them, what they really want. And yes, hardwood floors and marble countertops are important, but maybe it's the clients we have at this space, but most of the people that I talk to, quite quickly, it does become safety. It becomes healthy. It becomes air quality is such a relevant issue right now within that. So within respiratory illness, within airborne disease, all these aspects, that having a constant fresh flow of temperate air is so critical. And that's what a high performance home or a passive house, step code 5 net zero ready, these homes are starting to provide, is an ability to filter the air appropriately, to control all these variables in a home versus relying on it with just open airways and other pieces. So really being able to deliver on those pieces, what clients want. And in that conversation, what we've found is once you dig past the pretty things and you actually put it on paper, like, do you want a marble countertop or healthy air for your children? I've been finding there's a leaning towards, or there's more budget becoming available for the health and safety of the occupants. So the ultimate question is, can you have both? So do you have to give up the marble countertops, the hardwood floors, just to have those pieces? And ultimately it's going to come down to a client's budget and our ability to execute. I've never not done a solid countertop home. I've never really given up much of our interior budgets for high performance. It's a total sum game. I think it's easily to deliver both. If we go outside of the house, the place that's probably the biggest sacrifice in reality, and what I'm finding with increasing construction costs, is the actual form factor. So the building shape. I might get in trouble for this, but the lazy way to find architecture is a whole bunch of bumps and endos and corners, inside outside corners, creates a more complicated house. You have more drywall corners, outside corners, inside corners, flashing. Even for a stick frame, non-high performance or a code built project, those are more expensive. So in this space where I think there is a push and pull, and where you can still get a wonderfully beautiful magazine ready space on the inside and hit the high performance notes, is paying attention to that form factor. That's the biggest lesson I've learned in this entire process, is if we can stick to a basic shape, that Scandinavian minimalist design. The Vancouver Craftsman fits it really well as well. Those are sort of pre-1970s, 1950s houses in Vancouver were boxes. They were simple boxes. They fit well into our neighborhoods in holding that. Taking a foundation and going straight up with a roof on top is an easier build. It reduces cost. It reduces the number of details. So I think finding that the beauty in those homes is where probably the biggest push and pull is, less so the beautiful interiors or the wow factors that we're looking for. For B Collective, we came together, and one of the major initiatives with bringing together 3 builders with a lot of expertise already in place was to free up my time, to let me push for some innovation and not be involved as much in the day-to-day operations and organizations. What that led to was the writing of a grant, Clean BC Innovation Fund, which we were a recipient of in 2020, to develop a prefabricated biogenic offsite building system or something like that. It eventually called BOSS, B-O-S-S, Building Offsite Sustainable Systems. So the essence of BOSS is to be an open source collaborative system. It's all the details, all the content we've created is shared. It's available on a website. You put your email information in and you get sent some content. It's really, as I say to people a lot, there's not a lot of innovation. It's a closed panel system. It's very similar to what's being built by a lot of the closed panel producers in BC today. I think there's 5 or 6 of them. And that was intentional. We can't push innovation too far and not have anyone to produce it. I don't have a production facility and R&D budget to start a factory with robots, unfortunately. Maybe one day. What BOSS is a combination of readily available materials with common details that can build a structure. It's based off the light wood frame methodology. We explored a number of systems and trials and engineered wood products and CLT and TGI, vertical use of TGIs. But ultimately, it's the light wood framing in BC is actually very good. It's very known. It follows a pattern that makes a lot of sense. So in essence, to get into the product details, we've got a split stud system, an interior shear wall that makes up the air barrier, air barrier and the vapor barrier. We fill it right now with dense packed cellulose. We make sure our dense packed cellulose has a recycled content, so it has a carbon storing nature to it. We exterior sheathe with, depends on the situation, if fire rating is required, rock wool or dense glass. If that's not required and you can find it, wood fiber. Or even in certain cases when there is a low moisture load in the house, we'll use plywood. And that gives us a wall panel. We have 4 in design. We've got a permit in the City of Vancouver to build a single family house with the BOSS system. We've intentionally slowed it a little bit to get some prototyping. We've built some prototypes. We've marketed it. The idea is to allow all builders like yourselves to use the system. You could use us as support potentially, but you can take it. You can build it yourself. You could understand it yourself. Take it further. Hopefully, if you do that, you'll respond back with feedback and, hey, this worked. This was really terrible. And that's how the industry as a whole can get better. So it doesn't have to, if there's nothing proprietary about it, I think I'm quoting Jerry McCaughey previously from Integra, but from Offsite Tech, the product is, we tend to focus on the product, and it's really about the process. It's really understanding how offsite works. It's understanding the pitfalls. It's changing the way we design our houses. Again, within that, the funny thing within offsite, which marries really well with high performance, is that form factor. A simple box is just easier to build in that space. We've got 2 offsite builds right now. One of them is one would argue a more, I don't want to say more architecturally designed house, but it's a fancier house and it has more ins and outs. It still looks like a box, but it's got various patios and different pieces like that. It's more of a custom home. It's coming in twice as much on material costs alone, and also then your production costs and your installation in the offsite side. It is twice as much, to the tune of $200,000, than another house that we're building with BOSS that has been value engineered and is a simple box. So in this place of affordability, I don't think high performance is a factor. I don't think even the countertops or the flooring is a factor. It's more the shape of what we're building and how we're building it is really critical. So BOSS is intended to, that learning curve in this discussion that we've had today is intended to shorten that. Let's share, let's collaborate, let's show people how you can build quickly, affordably with offsite construction. And it's still in its early days. It's not a silver spoon. It's not going to solve everything immediately, but it's an evolution of how it can grow and how we can collaborate in a safe space to create that change that's so desperately needed. So as I mentioned, BOSS is intended to be open source. So what that means is we've developed 2 sample plans, City of Vancouver duplex that needs some light adjustments, but that's a long story, and a townhouse. And they were used to design the system in theory in a real world situation. So these are potentially repeatable homes. You can take those plans and build them if you want. But more importantly, what's within them is all your structural details, all the envelope details, all the components that we use on every one of our projects. I've said it through this conversation a number of times, this common detailing, this let's build the education together. All those details that we use are shared. They are there. They are available for any builder to download. The current website's boss.bcollective.ca. If you went to bcollective.ca, you'd find BOSS. I don't think my Google search is enough to say Google BOSS and you'll find our website, but that wasn't the intention. So I think, yeah, it's available to share and use. We've got a number of, if you start to follow us or subscribe, we do a number of events. The first house that I mentioned in City of Vancouver that's going to be built, we'll do a number of workshops so that more people can understand the value of it and how it works and reduce that learning curve. There's no reason you need to use Be Collective in that process. We've got some options that you could, if people choose. Maybe for the first one that you need that expert advice, hit us up. We want to see this change happen, and we need it to happen. We've got a place now where we're working in a pre-construction place with a number of well-known builders, and we're supporting them. We've signed a non-compete on the GC side, and so that we can openly share their systems, our systems in that place. It's a light little contract to get those things done so that you can generate trust in a place with your peers is key, and that's what Boss is really about. Is how can we create a forum to collaborate? And it did start with the product and these details. They're not perfect. To be honest, every single project they change, they evolve, they improve. There's feedback, and that's what's critical. Let's listen to our guys on site. That tape that you drew was really easy to draw, but did you think about it in 3D and how many angles? And I spent 2 days trying to do that detail. If you did it this way, it takes me 3 hours. That's how we're going to find the efficiencies in this space. It's not perfect. The details and even what we've created with Boss was in a fairly closed group. There's a number of experts in that space, but I don't think it's intended to be the silver spoon. It's not going to change the world yet. Let's let it evolve and see. And I think one of the areas within high performance, and if we get back to risk management, is there's an element of flexibility that's inherently in it. The passive house standard or performance standards don't typically tell you what to do. They're not prescriptive in nature. And I think early on as we evolve this, ultimately that's really good for policy and the big picture. In 5-10 years, we want to be able to do it our own way. But in a place of a learning curve and where we're struggling to get up this curve and understand what it is and risk and all these pieces, just being told what to do or having a company step in and do all the difficult parts for you and still allow you to be a GC, execute for your consumer, put your sidings in, put your interiors on, is an interesting burgeoning opportunity and something that we at Be Collective are essentially offering and see it being an offering that a number of companies can provide. It doesn't just need to be Be Collective at all. Let's use that expertise that we have and share it and provide it to everybody so that we all get better. Moving past what we're doing today, I obviously think high performance is going to be really critical. I believe in offsite. I think we're going to see much simpler buildings being created, simpler in the outward appearance of it, but much more complicated in the inside and the operation and how they work. I'm seeing a trend away from single-family homes, especially in urban environments. I think that is a luxury item. I think there's going to be an opportunity to continue to build them, but that opportunity is going to get less and less. City of Vancouver is a good example. There's no more land that is going to be opened up for single-family homes. The sheer number is going to reduce, and I think you're going to see policy that's going to start to change that landscape. We've already seen it with duplexes being allowed everywhere. There's the talk of the multiplex coming into play on those RS zoned lots, which would be a 6 or even an 8 unit building. Those are the kind of changes that we're going to start to see, and I think builders need to be ready for that. I think the days of cranking out tons of single-family homes are going to go away in the Metro Vancouver area, and really need to. If you start to dig into the realities of single-family homing, they cause a lot of environmental issues, social issues, a whole bunch of pieces. So the fun terms of that are like building back Paris and those pieces. I think there's a real opportunity, and then as a single-family builder, and that's what we have been. One of the things that we're rethinking or changing in our organization right now is that how do we move away from building that single-family Part 9 home for clients often in a custom space to something that is more socially impactful, that helps with the climate crisis and the housing crisis. Does that mean market rental, non-market rental, social housing, affordable housing, all these elements? I think there's a big future in that and a huge opportunity. And so I think if you were to stay code build single family, there's probably a timeline horizon. The succession plan of that is low. There's still always going to be luxury single family homes built, but I think really understanding that it is a luxury is really good, especially in our market, Metro Vancouver. There's always the carrot and the stick, and the stick ends up being policy and what government is talking about. And I think that we simply need more houses, and the answer isn't single family. It will be more smart density. I don't think this needs to be towers everywhere. That's probably the extreme pendulum. But I think the carrot, if you will, on that policy stick place would be the incentive of these smart densities. These are buildings that any builder can build. They don't have to be overly complicated, and they tend to fall more into that. It's easier to meet high performance. It's easier to meet the form factor. It actually checks a lot of the boxes already there. And they often have more budgets for integrated design and higher builder fees and these things. So they actually can work in our favor for our business to have a solid bottom line. So that's sort of the one thing that I think is coming down the path in the future. I think the other thing, EQ and empathy as a builder and the process that we're doing, it's something that I'm seeing in my builder groups a lot more, is awareness and understanding to that. The younger generations, to attract that, I don't know if they've had it in their schooling, but it's notable how much higher their attentiveness to that is. And so I think that's a really critical piece that we all impart moving forward. And so once we start to do that and truly listen and dig in, the aspects of high performance, the aspects of social housing or smart density start to just resonate to the surface. For me, on a personal note, home building in the future, I'm really focused on simple, logical, repeatable. And I don't think this needs to be across the industry. I don't think repeatable homes are elusive Vancouver Special 2.0. It needs to be a broad spectrum piece. In fact, I think that's a dangerous place to be, because we don't want all of the same buildings and it takes away design and architecture. But what we're focused on personally, but in my company, because that's what it's a reflection of, is really digging into a repeatable product. Let's move away from a service side of the business and really dig into a product, a really well executed high level product, a high level of design, that high level of complication, but it's a puzzle that we repeat. And that puzzle we repeat over and over, we can get better at where those pieces go. Our time will come down, our costs will come down, or at least stay on par or become really efficient. So that's what we've been just tirelessly working on, is what is that product that we can repeat over and over again. Our phones and our pockets are good examples. A lot of those phones have now reached a sort of a technology point where they're just adding cameras to the outside, but they all sort of look the same. They're a product in our products that is intentionally designed. It was intentionally created to be repeatable in that space. And I think housing needs an element of that. We need to be careful that it's not overdone. And I think it's a business choice we're making. The industry as a whole needs diversity and different layers to it. But for us and our business and me personally, it's really all about what is the common repetition that we can do over and over again to find our efficiencies. The advice I'd give my earlier self was, don't beat yourself up on all the mistakes you're going to make. It's tough. We're all going to make mistakes, and don't sweat the small stuff. I think I did relatively well, and I tell a lot of people, but in the space of conflict, you're going to have conflict, and it's such an easy opportunity to blow up or get angry. But I think staying calm, collected, and not harboring that is really critical. I think the space of mental health is really interesting. Over the last 3 years, we have changed our benefit packages to significantly increase counseling. This would be for mental health. And this was for our entire organization. It's something that everybody wanted. Everybody needed is to have that. And general construction as a whole, it's difficult. It's hard. Seasonality changed. 3 or 4 weeks ago, we were all sunny, banging nails outside, and now it's an atmospheric river coming through. And it's harder. It's difficult. It's not easy to get up on a freezing cold morning and put rain gear on and go down in a hole and dig around in the mud. It's a lot easier in the summer. Our organization at B Collective, obviously within the B Corp and the lenses that we're looking at and trying to develop a culture, we've actually changed a lot of our benefits to support more counseling. We polled our employees, our ownership group, and that was an area that we didn't have a lot of benefits for, so we changed and increased that for that mental health. Construction's difficult. There's a lot of conflict. There is friction in the process. I like to call it organized chaos, and it's probably more of chaos than organized. As an accountant, I try to organize everything, and so I think that's the friction for me, but each individual has a different level of struggle in that space, and I think being aware of that in a place of empathy and being able to listen and then change and alter to there is really critical for culture and just as leaders, our own sanity. There's a lot of pressure on this. There is risk in construction. There's not a lot of reward. The risk reward doesn't make sense. So you have to find that passion. You have to find those outlets in this space to make it work. To leave you with a parting thought or an attempt at summarizing would be this idea of rethinking, of unlearning and being open to innovation and change. I was blessed to not have a whole bunch of pre-conditioned ideas of what a house or how it should be built. It allowed me to get into this quickly. And I think it's a difficult process to unlearn and to rethink. So I think going into this with an open mind, with a healthy level of skepticism, because that's that kernel of knowledge already pre-existing, is going to be an absolute valuable space. And I think it's a necessity at this point in the industry. Policy states it. Consumers are wanting it. The change is going to happen. And I think this industry, construction as a whole, but especially the residential and the Part 9 area of building, really needs a little bit of a renaissance. And what a chance for opportunity. This will affect all of our bottom lines, and it can be in a very positive way. If you don't do that, I mean, the term often gets kicked around. I mean, you can be a dinosaur and stay in your rut and it'll eventually demise and go away, which arguably is good for some of us other builders as well. So I think the choice is ultimately you to either go in with an open mind and take on that rethinking or not at this point.